Many campaigns end because the dungeon master gets burned out, or they or the players just start to feel off and things become less fun. This goes on for a while and eventually the campaign dies. But there's a lifesaver you can deploy to keep your game alive, and that's the campaign check-in. This video is sponsored by Describe, more on them later. Greetings gamers, I'm Anto, and I hope there isn't a mimic in this room. And recently I've been feeling pretty despondent about my game. I was feeling a level of anxiety about running the game, I wasn't enjoying the process as much as I usually do, and overall I was feeling kind of burned out. This went on for a few weeks and I was getting progressively worse, and I knew that if I didn't do anything about it, my campaign was doomed to ultimately fail. So I sat down with my players and we had a campaign check-in. This is kind of like a session 0, except it happens in the middle of a campaign. The purpose of the check-in is for all the players and the DM to get back on the same page, figure out any problems and move forward with kind of renewed energy. I've talked a lot in the past about how important communication is between the DM and the players. Hello? And in this case, clear and open communication can save your game. I knew during my check-in I wanted to tell my players how I was feeling and get their thoughts, but I also wanted it to be a productive conversation that would result in actionable solutions. So I wrote a list of questions for my players to get their perspective on how things were going and where we were going in the future. Now, before we dive into the questions themselves, there are a couple of things that you need to cover to set up for the best campaign check-in possible. First, and most importantly, the check-in needs to be an open and honest conversation. You and the players need to feel comfortable enough putting all of it on the table and airing any problems you have. This means being honest with the players about how you're feeling and explaining the thought process behind any changes. Secondly, the players might say some things that you don't necessarily want to hear, or you might learn about interpersonal conflict you weren't aware of before, and you need to be ready to handle those things. If a player says they aren't having fun with a certain aspect of the game, you need to recognise that it's not a personal attack against you and listen to their concerns. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the questions I used in my campaign check-in. The first question is super broad, and I contextualise it by asking my players to first answer with positive, neutral, or negative. I do this right up front, so if there are any glaring issues, they can be dealt with first, or time can be set aside to discuss them later. This is an important question because not everyone enjoys the same part of the game. Some players are most engaged during combat and then fall silent during the roleplay scenes, and that's okay, but getting a feel for what people think about the balance will help you tailor your content going forward. I run exclusively homebrew settings, and I recognise what I think is cool and evocative might not be the case for other people, so this question gives the players the space to let me know what they like or dislike about the setting itself. During my check-in, for example, the players asked to see more of the specific world building I had done that makes Ashk feel different than a Western European inspired setting. This is great feedback because it tells me that they're engaging with the setting content that I've put down and they're happy to see more of it. Sometimes players will want to change their character or feel like they're stuck in a rut with a character, and this question gives them the space to bring up those issues. At my table, if a player wants to change their character, I don't put any restrictions in place to prevent that. Even if they were deep in a dungeon and wanted to change their character, the old character would just turn around and leave the dungeon, and they would find a new character in the next room or some other way to bring it in. I never want my players to be playing characters they aren't excited by and interested in. This question is a really useful one as the Dungeon Master because it allows you to find out what kind of game elements the players are enjoying, even if they don't fully understand why they're enjoying those certain elements. During my check-in, each player's favourite session was what I would call tentpole content, a big fight at the end of a story arc, or a combat that had something unique about it. Now this question also goes hand in hand with the next one. This is one of the questions that it's probably going to be the hardest to get an honest answer on because a lot of the time people don't want to hurt your feelings. This is why it's really important to make it clear at the start of the campaign check-in that this is an open and honest communication and you want the players to be honest. In my check-in, the players universally agreed that a particular session in a casino was the worst one because only one of the characters got to be an active participant, which left everyone else feeling useless. The lesson I learned from this is that no matter how contrived it might be, I need to make sure that if one of my characters is invited to participate in an event, all the characters need to be invited, or I need to handle the situation in a one-on-one session outside of the regular game. If you want to see how I handle one-on-one sessions, you can find a video on that right up here. This video was inspired by an article in my new magazine, SIDEQUEST. SIDEQUEST is a monthly RPG magazine available to patrons on my Patreon who pledge $5 or more. Issue 1 is now available, and it contains an introduction to my campaign setting of Ashk, the Ranger of the Wild, which is a complete rebuild of the Ranger class, an article on the campaign check-in, which is this video, and a new monster, the Sleeper of Yukora. So if you want to help support the channel and get even more content for your games, check out SIDEQUEST in the link below. Now, back to the video. This is one of my favourite questions because it gives me so much direction as the Dungeon Master. The players tell me which are the hooks or rumours that they're most interested in, and then I can prioritise that content. There were two clear hooks that the players were excited by in my check-in. The first was return to the city of Sahil, a cursed land run by revenants, and try and break that curse. And the second was to find the lost city of gold. This means I now have a crystal clear direction of where the players should be going when they finish their current quest. I include this question so I can get a feeling for which characters my players have resonated with and which ones I should include more in the future. This can also give me an idea of the kinds of characters the players enjoy interacting with. This question is another way for you as the Dungeon Master to get content ideas from your players. In my check-in, there are a few common threads for what the players wanted more of. They wanted to see more travel time and exploration and less hand-waving of moving between settlements. This is something I promised in my campaign pitch, but because we play for such a short time each week, I hadn't let travel live up to its proper dangerous reputation. Overwhelmingly, the players also wanted more magical items, even if they were just baubles. They wanted the sweet treasure to give them a sense of progression. And the last thing the players expressed interest in seeing more of was interacting with interesting monsters and harvesting parts of them. This gave me a really clear picture moving forward of what kind of content I need to put in front of my players. This last question is one I included in my check purely so I know how best to spend my pre-prep time. I asked the players whether they would rather get their quest from a town job board or the equivalent of it, or whether they would rather be given the job by an approaching NPC. The group, for the most part, said that they liked being able to pick and choose jobs from the job board setup, and that gave them a sense of freedom that they enjoyed. This is great feedback for me because it means in the future I can plan my adventures out ahead of time and present them on job boards, in newspapers, or through similar means for the players to discover. Before we get to the final part of the campaign check-in, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. Probably the most important part of the entire campaign check-in is the roundup, where you as the Dungeon Master take the information from the players that they've given you and pack it into actionable changes that you can make. At the end of my checkup, I was getting a pretty clear sense of what the players wanted from this campaign. They wanted an action-adventure movie with big tentpole moments, larger-than-life characters, and plenty of opportunities to slay monsters and get treasure. So I asked them if they would be interested in forming their own organisation and becoming monster hunters. They were really interested in becoming Just Deserts Inc. and definitely wanted to do some more monster hunting, but they also saw themselves as kind of Tomb Raiders as well. If you've been following the channel for a while now, you'll know that I'm a big fan of anything that reduces your mental overhead as a DM, which is why I'm really pleased that today's video is sponsored by Describe. Describe has thousands of pre-written description boxes like the ones you'd find in a published adventure to help you bring your world to life for your players. Do you need to describe the creepy castle your players are heading towards? Describe has got your back. Want to give your fireball spell a bit more pizzazz? Load up the Describe entry. Or if you want to describe some monsters, pull up the entry on Describe and get a custom description that you can use to excite or terrify your players. Many of the description boxes on Describe have been written or edited by Wizards of the Coast alumni, and they're all designed to fit in with the established 5th edition style. Describe has hundreds of text boxes available for free, but you can unlock thousands more with a monthly subscription. You can even tailor your subscription depending on what kind of things that you want to describe, or you can choose an option that gives you access to everything. And if you use the code Icarus at checkout, you're going to get 10% off your first order, which will effectively give you a free month if you're picking up an annual subscription. Check out Describe using the link below, and thanks again to them for helping to support the channel. This check-in session was invaluable for me to kind of reorientate myself as a Dungeon Master and figure out what the players wanted. Now I know exactly the kinds of content that the players have been enjoying and want to see more of, and it's going to make my life as the Dungeon Master so much easier. But these are just my questions that I pose to my players. I want to know what questions that you would ask down in the comments below. If you want to get more DM tips, I have an entire playlist just over there, but until next time, happy gaming.